chilling here at the Aria, and guys, check out all these poker tables back here. These are all overflow poker tables outside of the poker room, on the casino floor, in the pit. They cleared out some slot machines, had to make room for all these extra poker tables. That can only mean one thing: the World Series of Poker is just about upon us. And combined with that, there's also a WPT event happening here at Aria. It's going on now. I don't really have any details for you other than check your local listings. And by local listings, I mean your Las Vegas listing. Anyway, it's not really too late at the moment. It is 1:15 in the morning. I just wrapped up a poker session, and I'm a little bit wiped out because I only got 4 hours of sleep the previous night. They're doing a bunch of construction in our building, in the unit next to ours. First world problems, you know? So anyway, just wrapping it up, and to say that this was a swingy session would be putting it lightly. So the majority of this vlog is just gonna be going over some hands. I know a lot of you guys like hands. The story will have to revolve around these poker hands, and yeah, I didn't really capture too much here at the Aria today or anything else from my day. So let's talk about some poker hands, and then after that, I have a couple of small announcements to make. So we'll do that after these hands. Anyway, let's get into it. So we're playing 2-5 no limit hold'em here at the Aria, $1,000 max buy-in, in for 1,000. I look down at King 10 offsuit in the big blinds. Go ahead and complete that and straddler checks. 5 ways to a flop of 10-6-5 with 2 spades. Small blind checks, I decided to bet it. I bet $40 here. It's pretty wet. There's a lot of hands that can continue there. So I think sizing up is appropriate. So I bet $40 into 50. Only the button makes the call. So the 2 of us are off to a turn card, which is an offsuit ace. I think betting here again is certainly reasonable, if not preferred, since the only hand I should be really worried about here would be like an ace high flush draw that has now improved to a pair of aces, or maybe like ace 6 or ace 5. Aside from that, there's so many draws that I think I can extract value from. So I think betting is certainly fine, but I decided to check it. And I guess one reason is maybe that we can't get 3 streets from worse too often here. So after I check it, the action checks all the way through. River's an offsuit 7. Since all draws have missed, I decided to check it over to the button, try and induce a bet. Our wish is granted when the button bets $90. I don't wait too long before making the call here, and sure enough, the button says you are good. So I go ahead and show, and yep, she goes ahead and mucks it. So at least we get the bet on the river there. Would have not been too happy if it just went check check on the river, but we get 2 streets of value there, so can't complain. In this next hand, we're playing 7-handed. No straddle on in this hand. Folds to the cutoff, who opens for $15. Folds to me in the small blind, and I look down at 2 black aces. The greatest hand ever created. So time for a 3-bet, and I make it $60 out of position. Pretty standard sizing. Only the cutoff call, so heads up this time to King Queen 9 rainbow. When a board is disconnected and I only have 1 pair, oftentimes, especially out of position, I'll go into pot control mode. So that's what I decided to do here. I check it over to him, and he puts out a bet right away, and it's pretty sizable. Bet's $120, full pot. Not exactly loving it, but obviously not gonna just check fold to 1 bet here. So I make the call, off to a turn card, which comes total brick, offsuit 4. I check it, and this time he checks it back. River comes another king, so not exactly the card that I had in mind. Don't see too much value in betting here, and after I check it over to my opponent apparently does see value in betting here. He bets $280. So not really feeling too good about this situation. However, I don't think I can fold here, because it is pretty interesting that I have 2 aces, and ace king is double blocked by my hand. Would he really be betting full pot on the flop with a hand like king jack or king 10? Tough to say, but I have to suspect that would be a bit overvaluing those types of hands. Of course, that's just me projecting, and I don't really know what he would do. Maybe he just sees top pair and would bet that much. With all those factors in mind, and after the flop goes check check, don't want to just give up my hand after maybe under-repping it a little bit, just check calling on the flop. So do my usual thing here. I toss in the call, and we get shown 7-4 spades. So seems as if we got the maximum here, and just under-repping our hand, going into check call mode there works out very nicely. Take it down. So things are going pretty swimmingly so far in the 2-5 session, and in this next hand we see 2 limpers before looking down at 9-7 of clubs on the button. Had a little bit of a discussion in the hand history lounge about when to ISO facing what number of limpers. My standard has always been, if there's 1 or 2 limpers, I will still look to isolate those weak limpers with a wide variety of playable hands, such as suited connectors and suited gappers. Any more limpers than that, if there's 3 or more limpers, I will only raise for pure value. So if I happen to have a suited connector after there's 3 or 4 limps, then I'll just limp along. But if I have a hand like ace king, ace queen suited, I'll put in a raise even after that many limpers in front of me. Anyway, back to this hand with 2 limpers. Could be borderline, but I think it's okay. I seem to have done okay in these 2-5 games following this sort of a rule of thumb. So 35 it is. The big blind and the second limper make the call. So 3 ways to a flop of ace king 3 with 2 clubs. Flop ourselves a flush draw here, and when it checks to me, I'm going to put in a bet, but I don't think I need to size too big in this spot. I sized down to $40 since a lot of hands are going to have to fold here, all sorts of pocket pairs, and the only hands that can really continue here are going to be top pair, maybe middle pair will float here, and then other flush draws. We could potentially get floated by a gutter ball to the Broadway, but being out of position and a flush draw on board, that seems a little bit unlikely. So I think we fold out most hands here, even with a small bet. The big blind feels otherwise, and he makes the call. So heads up to a turn card, which comes an offsuit 7. So now we add a pair to our flush draw, and when he checks it to me, considering that we pick up additional equity against the top pair, I think another bet is in order here. I think we can check back here, but I kind of like betting just to keep the semi-bluff on and maybe fold out even if he happens to have a king that he called the flop with, something like king queen, try and fold out those hands. So I bet 105 here on the turn, and my opponent calls again, unfortunately. So now it seems pretty clear that he has top pair in this position. And when I raised to $35 pre-flop, it seems like he's probably weighted to ace 10 plus, normally I would say. So when the river comes in offsuit jack and he checks it over to me, it's time to make a decision here. Either go for the gusto and put in the third barrel, size appropriately to force top pair off of their holdings and send that one into the muck, or check it back and give up. It's pretty close decision. It really seems like he's gonna have top pair here a lot of the time, and probably a strong top pair. We do have a range advantage here, having an ace and the king on the flop. We have all the sets. He does not have all the sets. We have ace king. You would expect him to 3-bet ace king pre-flop. So having that range advantage makes me want to put in the bet. Having 2 clubs in my hand makes me want to check it back. And again, just trying to play a little bit straightforward here in the 2-5 game. I take the straightforward route and I check it back, and we get shown ace 9 of hearts, which is a little bit frustrating / annoying, because if I knew that that was his exact holding, again, talking about this with some of my Hand History Lounge buddies, if I knew that that was his exact holding and he had some suited aces in there, maybe I should be putting in that third barrel. But I guess I gave him a little bit more credit for his exact holding here. Weighted him a little bit stronger, just decided to give up there. Don't know, maybe he would have called anyway, since I think he was aware of the fact that I did raise on the button following 2 limpers. So tough to really know what would happen there if I put in the third barrel. I do know what happens though when we check back. We lose this hand. All right, moving on to the next hand, where we look down at queen jack of diamonds from under the gun. Gonna open this one up for $20. Both of the blinds call, and we see a flop of king 10 7 with 2 hearts. Flop ourselves the open ender, so when it checks to us, pretty standard c-bet here. Can represent the king. We have good equity, no showdown value. So I bet $35. Small blind folds, big blind calls. Off to a river card. It's a good one. It's a 9 of spades. Brings us the nuts while putting a second flush draw on board. Checks it over to me. Now time to switch from bluffing to value betting. This time I bet $110. Thinks for a little while, and then he makes the call again. Looking for a brick river, and not quite a brick river. We see a 6 of hearts. Good news is that he checks it over to us though, so I would have to imagine after check calling 2 streets, he would probably lead out with a made hand, with a made flush. So I think I'm gonna go for some value here. I'm not gonna love it if we get check shoved on, but you're just gonna have to cross that type of a bridge when you come to it. So time to go for some more value. I bet $275 here on the river, and my opponent goes deep into the tank. He's thinking for quite some time, and clearly deciding between call or fold. After thinking for maybe close to a minute, he tosses in the call. So that's some good news. We go ahead and show, and it's good. So pretty straightforward hand there. Semi bluff with good equity on the flop. get there, and straightforward poker. Not too long after that, there was a bit of a turn in the tables, you might say. Interesting hand develops when I open up 8-7 suited from early position. We find 3 callers and we find a favorable flop for the 8-7. It comes 8-7-3, 2 clubs. Again, it's a pretty wet flop, and after the 2 blinds check it over to me, definitely want to size up here since we have a vulnerable hand, but there are still lots of hands that can call us. Lots of hands with pairs, draws, combo draws, all sorts of things. So I go for the 75% pot bet $60. The cutoff decides that's not enough money to gamble for. He's gambling for all of his money. He's got $420 in his stack, jams it in there. Folds back to us, and I think we have a pretty trivial call here. So many draws available and not too many hands that can beat us in this spot. So tossing in the call, and we are off to a turn and river card. It's not exactly the run out we have in mind. It's an offsuit 10 on the turn, and the river is the 9 of clubs. So we see 3 clubs on the board, 4 to a straight, and some bad news from my opponent. He shows us pocket 10s. So he had some equity there. He can improve to a better 2 pair, and obviously he can improve to a set as well. Plus backdoor straights, who knows, all sorts of stuff can happen versus your 2 pair. And some run bad there. We get the money in pretty good, but the run good is not on our side in this hand in particular. Very shortly after that, some further developments occurred when there's the middle position open to $15. There's a call directly to his left, and I looked down at ace-10 offsuit. I decided to take the adventurous route this time. The person who opened for $15, I think he had been adjusting his raise sizes based on the strength of his hand. So $15, kind of a signal. Anytime I have a decent Broadway ace offsuit in particular, facing a weak open and a caller in between, I think it presents a squeeze opportunity. Some people might disagree, and that might certainly be a valid disagreement, but I decided to put in the 3-bet, put in the squeeze, and make it 60 to go. Folds back to the middle position, initial raiser who calls, and the player in between us calls as well. So my squeeze play fails, but we are going 3 ways to a flop which comes 10 high. It's 10-8-5 with 2 clubs. When they check it over to me, pretty standard c-bet here. Again, gonna size up slightly rather than down bet. It's a wet board, it's a low board. Lots of hands can continue, so I bet $130. Could even maybe size up a little bit there, since, as mentioned, can get so many hands that will call that bet and continue. But 130 it is. The middle position player folds, and the player in between us, once again, jams it all in. This time it's a little bit more. It's $690 total, and it's a tough spot. It's a little bit gross of a spot because when we have top pair here, it's somewhat unlikely that he's going to have top set. 2 pairs are going to be somewhat unlikely on this board, and that only leaves, for value hands, middle set and bottom set. That's not a lot of combinations of hands. What is available is tons of draws and combo draws, pair plus draws, all sorts of things like that. We're not in incredibly great shape against those hands. However, we don't have any clubs in our hand, which again makes those hands more likely. And then we're not incredibly deep here either. It's not too much more money to call off. There is some chance, which might tip the scales more towards calling, that he could be overvaluing a worse 10. Also, this is live poker, and it's live 2-5 no limit. So people could be doing all sorts of who knows what. There's always that WTF factor you must consider. Anyway, long story short, I go ahead and make the call. Top pair, top kicker. It's gonna be one of my better hands here that is not actually an overpair. Anyway, I'm tossing in the call. We're gonna see what happens here. We're gonna see all 5 cards. Turns an offsuit 4. River is a 3rd club, so it's not looking too good. We can't be too much anymore. And sure enough, 6-7 of clubs is what we get shown. We get beat twice. We get beat on the turn and the river. So it's basically a coin flip there. With the dead money in the middle, the call is fine mathematically. And I think versus his range, I think we're doing okay there. Again, if we include a hand like King 10 or Queen 10, if all those hands are within his range, then we're definitely doing okay. And never seen this player before. I think he's a recreational player. Don't think he watches the vlog. So I think we're doing okay with that call, and I think I'm okay getting it in that spot. What is much more questionable is my 3-bet pre-flop probably could just let the hand go, or since it's so cheap, just see a cheap flop and see what happens and play post flop. Keep the pot small. We were definitely gonna lose something no matter what, but maybe we don't lose the maximum by not putting in that 3-bet pre-flop and deviating from our strategy of just keeping things simple in these 2-5 games. Anyway, poker continues. The game of poker goes on, and very shortly after that, more interesting stuff happens, as it does, as it tends to do when you're playing poker for money. So anyway, the under the gun player opens for 25. Under the gun +1 calls, button calls, over to us in the big blind, looking down at pocket aces. The #1 best hand ever created. So time to put in a 3-bet, as you might have guessed, and I size it to $145. Under the gun thinks about it for a little bit and then folds. Under the gun +1 folds pretty quickly. Back to the button who makes the call. So we are off to see a flop here, heads up. Flop is 5-3 deuce rainbow, which I think is a pretty good flop because yes, he could have flopped a set here. He could also have some overpairs here that are gonna have to continue to a C-bet. They are going to want to maybe occasionally protect against a hand like ace-king that has 2 overs plus a straight draw. So I'm definitely gonna put in a bet here, and I think I can size up for those reasons. So I bet $200, and my opponent doesn't think for too long before ripping it in, jamming about $750 into the middle. It's a little bit trivial of a call here. If we're losing to a set, then that sucks, but we're just gonna have to call it off. There's too many overpairs that my opponent can have. Again, he could be trying to protect against a hand like ace-king, and I could be putting in a squeeze play there with such a hand, ace-king, ace-queen, something like this, facing the initial raiser and the 2 calls in between. So after he jams it in, I'm gonna call it. We're gonna see all 5 cards once again. The turn pairs the board. The river brings a 6. There's now 4 to a straight on board. But good news is we get shown 6-3 of spades. My opponent flopped pair plus straight draw, and thankfully that 5 on the turn protects us from that 6 on the river. We end up with a better 2 pair, aces and 5s, than his 3 pair, you might say. No, 6s and 5s. That's a nice turn of events following the ace-10 hand immediately before that one. Moving on to some more craziness, we look down at 5-6 from under the gun. 5-6 of hearts. We make it 20 to go. Cut off in the button call, so 3 ways to a flop of queen 7 deuce with 2 hearts. Same concept as when we flopped open-ended before. We flopped ourselves some good equity. We have no showdown value, so a C-bet is in order. And represent a hand like ace queen or king queen. That's my thoughts when I bet $30. They cut off and he makes the call. So heads up to a turn card, which is the ace of hearts. So we improve to a flush right away. Again, time to switch from semi-bluffing to value betting, this time to the tune of $65. Once again, my opponent calls. Rip is a good card, it does not pair the board, it does not bring any further hearts, offsuit 10. Pretty straightforward here once again, just gonna go for more value. I bet 155, hope my opponent improves to 2 pair somewhere along the way here. And thinks for a little bit, and he makes the call. So I go ahead and show my hand. My opponent, however, shows us Jack-8 of hearts. So, flush over flush. What do you know? Things happening. Things are happening here on this 2-5 table, and a lot of cooler situations have developed. This one's not going to go in our favor, unfortunately. All right, one more hand to look at, and it's definitely worth a look. So in this hand, the under the gun player opens for 15. There's a call in middle position, and I look down at pocket jacks in the hijack. In several of my previous videos, I've mentioned not wanting to put in a 3-bet versus an under the gun raiser. However, I've started to kind of question my thinking in that regard, because oftentimes I see a lot of people putting in a 3-bet versus a early position or under the gun raiser in these low stakes to mid stakes games, and they seem to do okay with it. It doesn't seem like the under the gun range is too snug to where we're just automatically putting ourselves in a bad spot and putting ourselves open to a 4-bet that we're not gonna like seeing. So anyway, I've been thinking about that a little bit, and this is one of those spots I try to take advantage of, especially with the 3x open. If it was a 4x or 5x open, maybe I would flat more often. Versus the 3x, I make it $60 to go. The button cold calls, and the under the gun and middle position players call as well. So we are still going 4 ways to a flop here. Flop comes queen, queen, 9 with 2 diamonds. Action checks to me, and even though with the 2 queens on board, and certainly one of my opponents can maybe have a queen or pocket 9s. I think a bet makes sense here for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want to see an ace or a king come on the turn if we happen to give a free card. 2, I think my opponents are going to play mostly face up in this situation. When you're in a multi-way hand and it's a 3-bet pot, those 2 factors sort of combine, and most of your opponents, I think, are probably going to have to play pretty straightforward. When you're in a multi-way pot, you're sort of protected just by that fact, where you're not going to get bluffed out too often just because people have to worry about all those other opponents calling them down. Anyway, that's my thinking, and I don't think I need to bet too big here, but I don't want to bet too small. So, not sure if that's even worth mentioning, but I bet $110. The button, however, right behind me makes it $240 to go, and it folds back to me. So it's a little bit gross / annoying of a spot because the raise is so small and we're very deep in this situation. We're somewhere around $1,800 effective in this spot. The raise is only $130, but all of those things I just mentioned, I think are true. Maybe there's some chance my opponent could have like pocket 10s, flush draw and straight draw. Jack 10 of diamonds could be a possibility. Maybe some raw flush draw holdings. It's all speculation, and I don't really think that's the case. I think, as mentioned, my opponents are gonna play pretty straightforward and probably just call in those spots. Again, I don't really know for sure, but I do know that it's only $130 more. So, planning on folding on just about every turn card, I go ahead and make the call, and only due to the fact that the price is so good. Definitely planning on finding a fold on a lot of turn cards, the vast majority of turn cards. However, when the offsuit jack comes on the turn, that's not gonna be a card that I'm gonna fold to. I check it over to the button, who puts out another bet. This time it's about $550. That's a pretty sizable bet. There's about $1,000 behind. Folding is now out of the question, and it is now a debate between jamming it all in here on the turn or flat calling and hoping to see another bet the rest of the money on the river. If we flat call, we run the risk of maybe a diamond coming, a 9 coming, or some hand, some card that's gonna make me want to second guess calling it off, such as a king or an ace. I think my opponent's holdings are always going to be pocket 9s, an ace queen here, sometimes king queen, but probably not. I think if we jam it in, it's going to be pretty impossible for pocket 9s to fold. And I think if we jam it in, maybe after some Hollywooding and fake tanking, maybe we can also still get that call from ace queen. It's always a little bit tougher when you're out of position, deciding what to do in these kinds of spots. Anyway, after some deliberation, some real deliberation and debating between jamming it all in or flat calling, plus a little bit of Hollywooding here on the turn, I decide on the jam. I go ahead and just jam it all in there, hoping to get a call from pocket 9s or the naked queen. My opponent calls pretty quickly. So we were off to a river card, which, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I think it was a 10. I go ahead and show, since I was the aggressor, flip over the pocket jacks, and my opponent gives a very deflated sort of sigh, which to us is going to be good news. My opponent shows us ace queen. So again, my opponent was playing very straightforward there, as expected in the 4-way pot, especially in a 3-bet pot. I feel like we're probably just gonna be getting owned there a lot on the flop, facing that flop raise and that sizing. The good news for us is that we get the maximum when we do connect, we do hit that jack. It would be really unfortunate to somehow not get the maximum after turning gin, because that would mean that our call on the flop of that raise is just completely unprofitable. So we do get the maximum here, and that works out extremely well, to say the least. And it's not often that I genuinely feel bad in poker, but this is a rare time when I actually kind of feel bad about that one. I think we could probably get away from it on the flop. We could probably find a fold, but I'm just not one to fold for those good prices, you know, those sizings, those small sizings. I don't like to let it go, and just that deflated sigh from my opponent. man, obviously my opponent feels much worse than I do about that. And I just know the feeling, you know? We've all been there, we've all given beats, we've all taken beats. We definitely know that feeling. The good news for us is we're scooping massive pot here in a 2-5 game. There's gonna be something like 800 big blinds or something absurd in this pot. Obviously it's nice to see that massive amount of run good after some recent stretches of run bad. Often that's kind of gonna be the case when you have a pot of this size. Something ridiculous and crazy is gonna have to happen in order for 800 big blinds to get in the middle. And yeah, sure enough, something crazy happened here. And that's definitely gonna be the hand of the session and the most interesting hand of the session. It's gonna wrap up the session for us. We get into the game for $1,500. I added $500 on. We cash out of this game for $4,104. That's gonna be a profit of $2,604 according to my math. That's 500 big blinds. That's 5 standard buy-ins for a 2-5 game. Profit in one session. That's a pretty good 2-5 session. So no complaints. I'm a little bit tired, but happy to be sticking it out in this session and happy to have run into that run good, which, yeah. All right, I'm wiped. I'm gonna go crash and come right back. Maybe somewhere interesting, hopefully. Take you guys somewhere interesting. Just a couple quick announcements and then we'll call it a video. Ready? All right, guys, it's nowhere interesting. It's just the apartment. This video is already way too long. So just some quick announcements here. First one, the WSOP is upon us. So the first meetup game, the first WSOP meetup game is going to be June 6th. Check out, there'll be a link below somewhere. I don't know, maybe here, maybe down below as well. More info found at that link. We're planning on doing 3 meetup games throughout the course of the World Series, plus 1 additional event, something fun that's still in the works. Hopefully it'll happen. Next thing, we are refreshing the favorable apparel line. So now's the time if you want to get something from version 1.0. First 15 people who buy a hoodie, I'm gonna personally call you and thank you. First 15 people who want to get a hoodie, get in there. Also, we're gonna put all these t-shirts, we're gonna have WSOP sale, 20% off all the favorable t-shirts, and then they're gone forever. So if you want, you know, 1.0, version 1.0 from the, all right, that's it, guys. Yeah, World Series is coming up, so I'm gonna be updating my Instagram page every single day, my Instagram feed, my Instagram stories, every single day, and then if something interesting is going on in any one particular day, I'll fire the vlog back up as well. But if you wanna know what's happening every single day, you know, like if I'm playing a tournament and we register at level 1, we bust out in level 3, it just doesn't seem that vlog worthy. But I will be putting some tournament stuff in here and there where appropriate and where, you know, it's interesting. Anyway, all the wins and losses, everything, daily basis, you'll find it on Instagram. All right, that's it. Video's long. Signing off. See you next time.